Welcome to session 4E. So we are looking at the theory, going from theory to practice. So the Global Internal Audit Standards implementation a year on. And we are fortunate to have Kylie McRae and Dr. Lakshmi presenting for us today. So Kylie is the Manager of Quality Services at IIA-Australia. She has been in this role since November 2021 and has over 30 years of experience providing assurance services, governance, risk management and compliance advice and support. And she has held several CAE and CRO roles in both the public and the private sectors. She was also a Director of the IIA-Australia Board and had 2 years as Vice President and served on the New South Wales Chapter Council. And she's also my colleague at IIA-Australia. And Dr. Lakshmi is the Director of Internal Audit and Chief Audit Executive at the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice. She is a strategic leader with a doctorate degree in education and has extensive experience across the public sector. Over the past 2 years as CAE, Lakshmi has championed the Global Internal Audit Standards, embedding them into practice to strengthen the assurance frameworks and to build organisational resilience. And her vision extends beyond compliance, and she sees governance as a catalyst for trust, agility and sustainable progress. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage today.
Morning, everyone. So it's lovely to see you all this morning. So as many of you will have known, I think some of you were in the earlier presentation, I'm responsible for the delivery of EQA services on behalf of IIA-Australia. So as you can imagine, the last 15 months, or actually a little bit longer because we were doing gap assessments before that, has been very, very, very busy for us. But what it's allowed us to do is to support our members to implement the Global Internal Audit Standards, but it's also allowed us to see key things that will help with practical implementation. So I'm going to walk you through some of those things that I've seen, successful practices in implementing the GIAS, and Lakshmi will talk to you about how she's done that in her function at New South Wales Communities and Justice, with great success, I might say. And the lessons that she's learned from that. So we're really hoping that this session gives you some practical advice for implementing the standards. So just very quickly, we're going to talk to you about embedding the Global Internal Audit Standards into internal audit methodology and adapting your tools and frameworks for the standards. We're going to talk to you a little bit, very high level, about embedding topical requirements in your internal audits, and Hayley's also available if you need to ask specific questions about that. I'm going to talk to you about measuring impact and continuous improvement, which is a key theme of the standards, and assessing performance and enhancing your quality processes, and lastly about operationalising those standards in practice. All right, so we've just got a diagram up there about embedding the Global Internal Audit Standards into methodology. So I think a lot of what we've seen is the really successful implementations of the Global Internal Audit Standards. People have done this, so embedding those standards into your methodology is the foundation. People underestimate how much methodology drives behaviour in an internal audit function. We have seen some teams who updated their templates. So they updated their templates, planning templates, etc., to reflect the standards, but the methodology itself remained static. It didn't reflect the standards, so people defaulted to their old habits because they think, oh, what do I have to do with this? Go back to the manual, it's not there, we'll just do what we've always done. And that doesn't meet the requirements of the new standards. So the first thing you needed to do, and that people did that were successful, was have a look at the current audit methodology and review that against the Global Internal Audit Standards. Map the Global Internal Audit Standards to your existing requirements. Identify where you've got those gaps. Update your audit manuals and your templates and your guidance. Most importantly, train the team. It wasn't, for some functions, it wasn't, going to the new standards wasn't a huge change, because particularly those that were operating at that higher end, that had the resources to operate at that higher end, they didn't have to make huge changes. But for other functions, it was a significant uplift and continues to be a significant uplift. There is a fundamental shift between the old standards and the new, and it's not enough to implement those changes, put those changes in your methodology, put those changes in your templates, and then say to your internal audit teams, off you go. Go do it. They need to understand why they're doing it, how they're doing it, what they're doing it for. And you also need to have a governance framework for continually reviewing your methodology and continually updating it, and that should be part of your quality assurance and improvement program. So all those things come out of your quality assurance and improvement program, all those stakeholder surveys that you do, you know, post-action reviews that you might do on an audit, engagement supervision, whatever, they will all give you ideas as to where the methodology might be falling down, where it needs to be tweaked. Even if that methodology complies with the Global Internal Audit Standards, doesn't mean it's going to continue to remain perfect, and it needs to shift with time. All right. So, as I said, frameworks and methodology are key to implementing the standards and updating them. So update your charters, update your methodologies. You need to embed risk-based planning. Hopefully everybody had risk-based planning. But the key difference in the new standards is you don't just need risk-based planning, you need to link your internal audit plan to organisational strategy. That's what the standards require. In organisations where risks are derived from the strategy, that's relatively simple. In organisations where it's not, that can get a little bit more challenging. Excuse me. You need to cover the full engagement life cycle and quality management, and maintain a dynamic audit universe. Your organisations are always changing. It doesn't matter how you've done it. Excuse me, I just need to get a drink. So with your tools and your templates, this is enhancing your tools to make sure you can get a grasp on strategic and emerging risks. Very importantly, your risks need to be linked to your objectives. They need to drive those audit objectives, not the other way around. The objectives shouldn't drive the risk assessment. The risk assessment should drive the definition of audit objectives. And there needs to be a clear linkage between those two shown in your planning documentation. And scope, those who've heard my earlier presentation will know, scope is very well defined in the new standards around, it's not the questions you're seeking to answer from an audit. Scope is what systems are in, what systems are out, etc. What timeframes are we looking at? You need to use risk-driven work programs, and you need to do root cause analysis on your findings. Particularly, I'd suggest for any finding that's medium and above, and the standards require that you socialise those root causes with management. All right, so the whole idea with the standards and with this uplift in tools and templates is about supporting your internal auditors to think more critically, drive that better strategic thinking, and not drive more paperwork. It's about prompting people to really, particularly with root cause and things like that, get to the nub of the problem. With your processes, it's a really good idea that you have that rolling dynamic audit planning. As I said, the organisations don't remain static, the risks don't remain static. You should be reviewing that audit plan at least every 6 months. I'd suggest before every ARC meeting to make sure that it's still in line with the risk assessments and in line with organisational strategy, because they could change in the meantime. Most of you will probably already review your internal audit plan just in terms of timing and can we deliver, etc., but perhaps think a little bit more broadly about it. in the processes, one of the things that we've seen and is commonly commented on in EQAs and that successful functions were able to demonstrate is that clear line of sight from the internal audit plan down to engagement planning. Then from engagement planning, we've got the risk assessment through to audit objectives, through to testing and through to the report. If we can't see that in an EQA, we are very likely to comment on it because that's all about the audit trail. How do you demonstrate your findings? How does that audit link up? You must have sufficient evidence, obviously, and I would hope that you all would. One of the things the new standards are trying to emphasise is the professional judgment of internal auditors over checklist compliance. And as I said, that's all about that critical thinking. And your follow-up should focus on effectiveness and risk reduction, not just whether a piece of paper says that this has been done. But that said, if your internal audit outcomes are appropriate and you're doing good root cause, you're coming up with good findings, etc., that should follow. It shouldn't be separate. So embedding the topical requirements. So the first thing I'd probably say is just because a topical requirement exists doesn't mean you need to include an audit in your audit plan. It's a common misconception. Do not have to do that. But what you do have to do is consider them. So if you've got an audit in your audit plan and there's a topical requirement covering it, at the moment there's only one topical requirement that is in effect, and that is cybersecurity became, was it last month, Hayley? February. Became effective in February. So you are required, if you do an audit of cybersecurity, to consider the topical requirement and the content of the topical requirement. It does not mean that you have to follow it. You might consider it and say, well, it's already covered by these frameworks that we're going to be auditing against, etc. So the other key trick for young players with the topical requirements is you'll think to yourself, oh, if I'm doing a cybersecurity audit, yes, it will apply and I need to consider whether we use it or whether it's covered by other elements. If you're doing another audit, if you're doing IT general controls, if you're doing, I don't know, privacy, something like that, that might trigger elements of the cybersecurity topical requirement, depending on what you're looking at. And when it does, then you're required to have a look at it. So what we'd say is consider it you will know in engagement planning, usually at risk assessment level. So include it in your risk assessment. You need to document why or why not you are going to, how applicable that topical requirement is. Any exclusions require you to document your rationale and judgment. And so we've got the current topics up there. So cybersecurity is in effect, it is active. Third party and organisational behaviour become active later this year. Later this year? Yeah. So the idea of the topical requirements is they're designed to enhance consistency and quality of internal audit services around the world and to support you performing engagements in those areas. But they're not mandatory for inclusion, they're mandatory for consideration, and that's something you should consider when you're doing them. Okay, so what we'd say is, at the internal audit planning stage, consider them in your annual risk assessment, consider whether they apply to any of your audits, map them to your audit universe and any planned engagements, and discuss coverage if you need to with the audit committee. At the engagement stage, as I said, assess the requirements for applicability, document. So just to stress it again, not all topical requirements require coverage. You need to use your professional judgment to assess that. They're always effective 12 months after they were released, always. And you need to embed consideration of them into your audit methodology, both at at audit planning and engagement planning level. All right, so measuring impact. So the key thing I wanted to say here is that impact's about about value, not volume. Doesn't matter, you can deliver 50 internal audits a year, but if they're not delivering value and valuable findings and things that are going to improve your organisation's governance, risk and control frameworks and help them deliver on strategy, the volume of audits you deliver means very little. So you really need to design your audits for value. So the way we talk about measuring impact is you can measure it by your governance, risk and control improvement. You'd need to come up with some data to measure it. It's about, helping your organisation have better decision making and accountability, and aligning to organisational objectives. If your audits are all aimed at helping your organisation achieve its objectives, you're having more impact than somebody that is doing pure compliance audits time and time again. So how to measure those things I've got up there, outcomes, have a look at outcomes. Did your audit contribute to reducing the risk? So did the actions that you recommended contribute to reducing that risk? How do you measure that? You'll need to think about that. You can get stakeholder and audit committee feedback, so management feedback. You can measure your coverage of strategic and emerging risks. Have that as a KPI. What's our percentage of risk coverage across the organisation? Some functions have even dropped down to the operational risk level, which is interesting. They do it at a strategic and an operational risk level. And then obviously you can measure it through your quality assurance and your standard conformance measures. And continuous improvement. So the standards have elevated the quality expectation or oversight of quality to a board level or to an audit committee level. So I've done that by moving those two key quality standards, standards 8.3 and 8.4, into domain 3, which is all about governance of the internal audit function. When we talk about internal audit quality, it's not just about conformance, it's about continuous improvement. It's about how you set up your things to continuously improve your function. It's that continual improvement loop. So you do your periodic self-assessments against the standards that the standards require you to do. You get to determine the period. I'd suggest not more than every 2 years for a period. You can do them, you can split them. So you might choose to do 2 domains 1 year, 2 domains the next year, particularly if your resources are stretched. Continuous improvement is about strong engagement supervision. So that that helps in 2 ways. It improves the capability and capacity of your staff, and also feeds back into methodology. What are the key things we're seeing that are repeating? It's about strong service provider management. It is not good enough, particularly in a co-source function, but even in an outsourced function, it is not generally good enough to hand a service provider a bit of paper that says, here's your terms of reference, go. You need to have more active supervision than that, or active management processes than that. Not least to meet the requirements of the standards, but also to ensure that you're getting value, because the service providers are generally technical experts in their field, but what they don't know is your organisation, and you need to help them understand that. File reviews are another means of continuous improvement. When I say file reviews, I'm not talking about engagement supervision file reviews. I'm talking about, pick a couple of files at random every year and review them to see how they aligned with methodology, etc. Feed that back in. That's one that larger functions tend to undertake. It's very difficult for smaller functions. External quality assessments, obviously, and ongoing training of your staff. So that is it from me, and I'll hand over to Lakshmi.
Thank you, Kylie. Hello, everyone. Please bear with me. I'll be on this slide for a little while. For those who don't know Department of Communities and Justice, it is a state government agency within New South Wales. It was formed in 2019 by bringing together 2 former agencies, that is Family and Community Services and Department of Justice. What that meant was 2 different internal audit teams overnight came together as well, at different levels of maturity and practices. I've been with this particular function, that is internal audit, since April 2024. I'm not an internal auditor. Sorry to disappoint you there. I did not know anything about internal audit until that day that I had joined that particular branch. I was asked to step in to fill in a temporary vacancy. I only knew that when internal auditors knock the door, it is a bit scary. That's all I knew. So my day job is leading the digital experience team, delivering large digital transformation programs. So when I joined the unit, it was, or a branch, that's what we are called now. It was very scary. So all I had to do was, first of all, understand what does this all mean. So I understood the New South Wales Treasury policy, that is the risk and management policy. And I tried to understand the standards. Everyone kept on mentioning the standards. In the Treasury policy, there was this IPPF that was mentioned, and I kept on searching that in the Google, and every time I clicked on it, it went to Global Internal Audit Standards. I said, for God's sake, there's nothing there, so I can learn about the internal. So accidentally, I learned about the Global Internal Audit Standards. I did not know about that. From that day till today, I have gone through a significant learning to the extent that I'm a newly minted certified internal auditor that happened in February through the IIA minting line. And it has a warranty period. That's why you have Kylie here to support me as well. So how did we go about whatever Kylie mentioned in terms of implementing the Global Internal Audit Standards? One of the strengths that I bring in is more around stepping back and looking at it. All right, this is the problem here. How do we now embed or operationalize anything that's been thought through more from that strategic perspective? When I read the Global Internal Audit Standards, what came to my mind was it's all principles-based. There are requirements, and they have done a fantastic job of even guiding you. What does the conformance requirements looks like as well? There's guidance available to you. So I made sure that I read back and forth the whole thing to do with Global Internal Standards in terms of the requirements and the conformance requirement. What I did was worked with the team to set up a working group to go through the same steps that Kylie mentioned earlier, that is the review, map, update, train, and establish. With the review, DCJ in its form had not gone through an external quality assessment at all. The former Facts and Community Services had, not the Justice, not that I could find any documents there, but as a DCJ, we had not gone through that. So what we did was we undertook the review first, so which gave us an independent view of what those gaps were, what are our strengths. So we leaned into our strengths and we acknowledged what the gaps were. And the assessment was done against the previous standards, that is the IPPF. And then there were high-level gaps that were identified with the new standards as well. So we looked at the gaps with the previous standards, so ensuring that what Kylie mentioned earlier, that people are habituated to going back to the methodology. We have done this because this was the standard. This is what we would do. So made sure that we filled those gaps. So positioned independently, as well as the quality assurance improvement program. They were the two significant gaps that we had from the old standards. But when we were trying to address that, I made sure that we were addressing that would align with the new standards as well. So upfront, then it all helped us to make sure that we were aligning with the new standards. In terms of mapping, so this is the process then we continued with all the other activities within the manual and the methodology work in terms of ensuring that we aligned it to the new standards, so that when we are addressing any gaps, we are not addressing the gaps that was identified for the previous standards, we were aligning it with the new standards. We identified quick wins. So we identified updating the charter was the easiest, updating role description to ensure that it reflected the terminology required for the internal auditors to demonstrate professionalism, due care, objectivity, etc. was included and all of that. And then we came up with a roadmap in terms of what would it look like for our short-term, medium-term, and long-term activities. So we created 3 streams of work, which I'll show you in a second. And then we ensured what Kylie mentioned earlier in terms of training. We used this program to uplift the training, uplift the awareness of the internal auditors, the new standards. What happens is When you have new standards published, you go through it and you're, yeah, it sounds familiar, it's similar. There's nothing much changed here. Everything else is similar as well. But when you start unpacking that a bit, that you realize, how will we operationalize it within your own context? Again, I'll repeat that it's principles-based standards. You can adopt the meeting those needs based on your context. They are not rules-based. So you can actually look at how will I actually adopt this within my own working environment. And while I'm doing this, you need to keep remembering that I wasn't an auditor, at least until now. I haven't done full end-to-end audit. Leading a team of capable, highly performing auditors who will question everything that you will ask them to change. No, but this is how I've done. I said, fantastic, no problems, but this is what the standards are asking, and they will then unpack the whole standard. But no, it's not saying exactly like that for us to do. So that's why the working group, including the senior internal auditors, helped me a lot because they led it, they co-designed it. I could see that, all right, now it's actually dawning upon them. Oh yeah, we are missing this. Maybe we need to go back and we need to do this differently. We need to do this. It also helped them uplift their awareness about the standards as well. And they would talk to their colleagues and they would share that information as well. So these are the 3 streams that I mentioned earlier, which we created to ensure that there was clear ownership of people leading these streams as well. And they were able to identify the gaps. And as Kylie mentioned earlier, what we have done is we have the first 12 months, that is since last October till this October, we are actually going to go through all the domains. We are picking one domain each quarter to go through, identify the gaps, and work on it, if possible, to address the gaps as well. If not, then the next year is when we will start addressing most of those gaps there as well. The next slide. Without challenges, achieving anything as large as this is not possible. What I'm showing you there is something that I've been thinking in my mind in terms of what are those challenges, including those resource-related ones, capacity, methodology, change management, governance oversight, and occupational-related matters. You can have all those challenges, but you'll need to list them somewhere and ensure as to what's the risk here, how much am I dealing with. You can't actually deal everything together. So you'll need to work out what does it look like. What you see there in an image, this is the way I thought it would be best, I will be best able to communicate to you as to how I've been able to think through the risk. So it's a heat map of all the factors and the risks associated with each of the challenges there. That gives you good profiles as to which ones do you actually venture into, which you avoid, and how can you address those challenges. So that's something that you would probably need to think through. Don't try and tackle everything together. Chunk it and make sure that you are able to manage that on a smaller incremental basis. So I come from the digital experience background I mentioned earlier. The concept that I have borrowed from there and I've been implementing within the team is minimum viable product. Minimum viable product that meets the requirements, that gives you the tick in terms of the compliance as well. But you're doing all of this within your own context, within your own operational context and the challenges that you have. What you see here is the CI/CD. This is the one that we established as an approach that how we will continue to align our practices with the Global Internal Audit Standards. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, again, is not a concept that's just generally known, but it's mostly, again, one that is come out of the software development area, wherein you do the constant code development, you test it, you release it, and then you test again. So it's a continuous integration and continuous delivery as well. So the way we have been doing it, for example, we have got our templates, the internal audit report templates. We have been working on it. Every audit that we have completed, we have reflected on what's missing, what we need to do to enhance it, to align it with the standards. Then we fix it. We have then adopted another slightly changed template. Now we have reached a stage wherein we can stabilize that and we go, okay, this is now going to be stable. So use that continuous integration, continuous delivery, try and use that in practice while you are doing the audit as well to be able to enable you to get that feedback from the real world. It's always good to have a manual, a methodology that's well documented, but you need those protocols on a day-to-day basis. How are you actually going to implement it and get the feedback from that to incorporate it back into your methodology to ensure that it is actually practical for you to be able to adopt. What I'll leave you with is 3 key things. That is minimum viable product. Don't, again, try and address everything in the requirements at once. Then continuous integration and continuous delivery. You will need to pause, check, and reflect. Reflecting in terms of the measures. Is it actually working? If it's not working, make sure you pivot it. And pivot it to ensure that you are still meeting the requirements. Remember, the requirements are principles-based. They are not rules, so you will be able to explain why something's working, why something's not working in your area, and how you are still aligned with the Global Internal Audit Standards. A concept that I've been developing over a few years is called as meaningful unlearning. That is, every time something new comes in, you need to unlearn the way you have been doing things before. Old habits die hard. So for me, the meaningful unlearning is the way to go. You need to welcome what that change looks like. You need to adopt that change. First of all, you need to make sure the mindset is that you are going to adopt the change. Then you take on the activities to transform the activities that you need to change. Slowly and steadily, you will reach where we call as the embed stage. And then again, you reflect on it. Be humble. If you were to read out that one, what I just mentioned, its acronym is the WATER. That is welcome, adopt, transform, embed, and reflect. I'll leave you with that concept. It's not hard. You need to just build it into your ways of doing it, chunk it, and you will see that in no time you will be compliant as well. Thank you. Kylie? Thank you.
All right, so just to wrap it up for you, these are the key things that Lakshmi and I wanted you to hopefully take away from today. The Global Internal Audit Standards adoption, it's a journey. It's not a one-off exercise. So it's about continually improving your function, continually trying to take yourself to the next level within the limits of the resources that you have. Strong methodology means you can be consistent on that journey. If your methodology is not strong, the chances of your ability to A, deliver value internal audit services and B, conform with the standards are reduced. To apply the standards practically means you need to be flexible. You need to think laterally around how they can apply to your organisation. And that's what Lakshmi did so well and her team at Communities and Justice. They've thought they've got a very large organisation and they've thought very laterally about how they can apply those standards in delivering value to that very large organisation. And quality and impact of your services needs to remain the focus. So thank you.
I am interested in knowing a little bit more about the risk-based root cause analysis. We do have a root cause analysis. We tend to ask the auditee, and we have it in the report, right? What is the root cause? We tend to ask them candidly why you think this happened. And we ask them this a couple of times, 5 times in total. But yeah, the concept first, what about documentation and the concept, and maybe an example or something like that.
So I think there's 3 elements. The standards say that you need a methodology for root cause. The 5 whys, as you've discussed, is one of those. I would say just asking management is good. Asking management is good in terms of you do need to consult with them. But from an evidence perspective, you need to go a bit deeper than that when you're doing that root cause analysis. When we refer to risk-based root cause analysis, what we mean there is that you're applying risk to the level of root cause analysis that you do. So for instance, if you have a low level finding, there is probably not much point in doing root cause analysis. They tend to be what they are, and, you know, depending on your definition of significance in your manual, which the standards require, you may not even track low rated findings. So there's very little point usually in doing root cause analysis on a low rated finding. But you might do the 5 whys, for example, on a medium rated finding, and you need to document how you got there. So talking to management about it is one of those things, but we would expect that the internal audit have done the 5 whys themselves before they get to management to try and confirm that. So it's a dual process. For a significant rated finding, and I'm just using those 3 levels, you may have different ratings, you might go up to 5 different levels, so you'll have to apply it. But for a significant rated finding, you might do 2 types of root cause analysis just to double confirm. So you might do the 5 whys, you might choose another model of root cause analysis to try and verify what's come up, if that makes sense. So that's what we mean by risk-based. So I hope that answers your question.
I was interested in you saying, was it meaningful unlearning, particularly with new staff who come into internal audit. They may have come from an external audit background, or they may have come from a finance background. So can you unpack that a little bit for us and what that would look like?
Sure, thank you. Yes, it is very hard, right, in terms of once you've gotten used to certain things and by default, the brain goes towards that in terms of, because that's your comfort zone. The way I have gone about doing it and help them understand is by involving them and working in ensuring that they're part of that, they can see the why behind it as well. Specifically, if you were to look at me, if I had asked for anything to be changed, not coming from an audit background, who are you to even say this? This is the methodology here, this is the standard here, this is how it works. But for me, I could see strategically that's not how it's going to work in the future with the new standards. To help them take them on the journey, I had to ensure that I stopped actually feeding them into or telling, well, you need to do this because the standards ask for it, right? So if I kept on saying that, it wouldn't go anywhere. So I had to work out, all right, I had to wait, watch, and I'm continuing to do that still as well, and get them to understand how it actually, they need to pivot in terms of whatever they are doing to do it in a different way. And there is a benefit not only for them, but for the internal audit function, the way it is perceived as well. So ensuring that you are having those discussions with them and the why behind it, for them to arrive at the why behind it, it's going to be really, really important. And it's for absolutely anything in terms of our lives as well, right? So we were using a physical card to swipe in to come into a train station, to now to that of a plastic card, to that of mobile phone. So we have had to unlearn and learn new things. But the core didn't change. So the core of their competencies in terms of auditing competencies that they're bringing in, be it external audit or the internal audit, that's not changing. All you're doing is helping them enhance it, see the wider application of it through the meaningful unlearning.
This is a practical question, I guess. So what are the things that you actually reported or go back to the board or the Audit and Risk Committee in relation to the compliance with the internal audit standards? Because from my experience, what they're interested in basically the report and the content of the report, but everything that you kind of explained earlier, a lot of it is actually happening in the background, process improvements, documentation, so that they don't really see it. So again, at the practical level, what is it exactly that you go to the committee or to the board to explain, look, this is the benefit of why we're complying with this?
You want to do it?
I'll probably take Kali's help as well, but I'll tell you how I've done it. I think it's very important to have the executive leadership team, that's what it's known as a board within the public sector environment for us, as well as the audit risk committee, to see how the internal audit function as such is delivering the work aligned with the standards, the professional standards, right? So keeping them informed is very important. Now, do you go back and tell them that every standard, what the gap looks like and what's happening, and you keep on reporting? Probably not. So what I did was the 3 streams that you saw, that's the kind of roadmap that I developed, and I took that to the executive leadership team, as well as I took that to the audit risk committee. And then I also ensured there were planning days and strategy days that I organized, wherein I actually brought in the audit risk committee members along with the internal audit team, and had got Khalid come in and talk to them about the Global Internal Audit Standards. And we have the 2 sides of the coin there. What are you expecting? That is the audit risk committee, and internal audit, how are you actually going to deliver? So they were both in the same room for them to understand what are the new requirements, what is expected of you, and what you will be delivering. Kali, anything else?
And I think in terms of reporting to the audit committee or the executive, you're absolutely right. What they're interested in is the internal audit report itself and what it says and what it concludes. But what the standards require of you of an internal audit function is to have those continuous improvement loops in place. And the standards require, specifically standard 8.3 requires, that at least once a year a report is made to the audit committee on the outcomes of internal audit's quality assurance and improvement program. But that does not need to be the detail, as Lakshmi said. It can be high-level themed dashboards, etc. This is what our quality assurance and improvement looks like. This is how we drive continuous improvement in internal audit all the time. And these are the high-level things we've identified. This is what we're going to do about it. Need only be a page less even.
Thank you.
We'll go for one more question, just over here.
Thank you so much for that presentation, really practical. I wanted to ask about the working group that you mentioned, Lakshmi. So you mentioned that when you started when you took on the role, you had a working group in place. Can you just talk a little bit more about who was involved and if that working group continues now that you've reached this stage of maturation?
Thank you. Yes, so the working group, I had to think through, as I said, there were challenges in my mind how we are going to operationalize the Global Internal Audit Standards. The other may not being from the internal audit team, everyone else being a competent internal auditors, explaining them why we will need to do something different was not going to be easy. So I have a team of around 10 internal auditors with 2 managers and some senior internal auditors as well, 6 senior internal auditors and 2 junior internal auditors. If I involve just the managers are as is very busy doing what they need to do in terms of engagement, delivery of the internal audit plan. Where rubber hits the road is mostly those senior internal auditors who are out there actually doing things as well. So my idea was to establish a working group, not because everyone needed to do everything. It was based on skills, competencies that they would bring in, and the capabilities as well as the experience as well. So one would be more familiar with the IT side of things. The other person would be bringing, I know how to manage the change or effective stakeholder engagement. So we needed all forms of skills and capabilities. So I worked with the managers and got their agreement, yep, this is how I'll proceed. And I actually sent out an expression of interest across all the team members and asked them to nominate which stream would be their preference, the first preference, the second preference, and the third preference. And they self-nominated, expressed their interest in whichever stream they wanted to be part of. And then I chose, based on the skills and capabilities, what it looked like to form each team, delivering upon those 3 streams. And yes, I have maintained the same working group for this year until I complete the full cycle of all the 4 domains. And then I'll revisit and again rejuvenate that working group with another set who can now go back and look at it objectively, what we delivered, what are the gaps now, how else can we deliver it differently.
Thank you. If there are any more questions, perhaps come and speak to our presenters after the session. Thank you very much, Lakshmi. It's great to hear the practical experience of internal auditors and our members in applying the standards. So we really value your insights and bringing it to life for us.